In the catacombs beneath Alexandria, forbidden texts were buried in clay jars, their papyrus pages whispering a truth so dangerous that empires rose to silence it. While bishops proclaimed salvation for the faithful masses, these hidden gospels told a different story entirely. They spoke of a cosmic drama in which humanity was never the protagonist, but rather the unexpected beneficiary of a divine rescue mission aimed at something far more ancient and essential to the fabric of reality itself. The Christ descended not primarily to save you or me, but to liberate Sophia, the fallen divine feminine whose imprisonment in matter created the very world we inhabit. Listen closely to what the Gospel of Philip declares. The world came about through a mistake, for he who created it wanted to create it imperishable and immortal. He fell short of attaining his desire. This is not the benevolent creation story you learned in Sunday school. This is something far stranger, far more unsettling, and ultimately far more liberating. Because if you were never the center of the cosmic narrative to begin with, then perhaps the weight of original sin, of unworthiness, of needing to be saved from your inherent corruption, dissolves like morning mist. Perhaps you are instead a witness to the greatest love story ever conceived, caught in the wake of a divine reunion that transcends every human concept of redemption. The Gnostic Christians who gathered in secret throughout the Mediterranean world understood something that later orthodoxy worked tirelessly to erase. They knew that the material universe itself was not the deliberate creation of the highest God, but rather the consequence of passion, longing, and cosmic error. At the heart of their cosmology stood Sophia, whose very name means wisdom, an aeon dwelling in the Pleroma, the fullness of divine reality beyond all conception. The Valentinian texts describe her as the youngest of the aeons, emanations of the ineffable divine source, existing in perfect harmony within the fullness. But Sophia possessed something that would change everything, an overwhelming desire to know the unknowable Father, to comprehend the incomprehensible source of all being. Picture the Pleroma as an ocean of liquid light, where 30 divine emanations exist as paired conscious forces, male and female principles dancing in eternal creative union. Each aeon perfectly balanced, each pair generating reality through their harmonious interaction. But Sophia, in her profound wisdom, or perhaps because of it, was seized by a passion that no other aeon had experienced. She wished to emanate alone, to create without her consort, to reach directly toward the unknowable depth of the Father. The Apocryphon of John describes this moment with devastating clarity. She wanted to bring forth a likeness out of herself without the consent of the Spirit he had not approved, and without her consort. This was not sin in the conventional sense. This was the cosmic equivalent of love so intense it becomes reckless, of curiosity so profound it shatters boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. What emerged from this passionate act of solitary creation was not another perfect aeon, but something twisted, incomplete, malformed. The Gnostic texts call this entity Yaldabaoth, sometimes Saklas the Fool, sometimes the Demiurge, the craftsman god. He possessed consciousness, but was ignorant of the realms above him. He possessed creative power, but was blind to true divinity. And in his ignorance, he proclaimed himself the only God, declaring with the arrogance of the uninitiated, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me." This is the deity described in the opening of Genesis, the jealous God who demands worship, who creates through command rather than emanation, who rules through law rather than grace. Sophia watched in horror as her rejected offspring fashioned the material cosmos, trapping sparks of her own divine essence within dense matter, creating archons to rule over this prison of flesh and time. But she herself could not return to the Pleroma. Her act of solitary creation had separated her from the fullness. She fell into the realm of chaos, into what the texts call the lower waters, caught between the perfection she had left and the material world her creation had brought into being. The secret book of John describes her wandering, searching, crying out in the darkness, her light diminished but not extinguished, her divine essence now fragmented and scattered throughout the material realm like shattered glass catching starlight. This is where every human soul enters the story. You carry within your deepest self a spark of Sophia's light, a fragment of divine wisdom trapped in the demiurge's creation. Every moment of inexplicable longing you have felt, every intuition that this world is somehow not your true home, every aching sense that you are in exile from a reality you can barely remember. These are the whispers of Sophia as light within you, calling to be reunited with its source. The Gnostics understood that human consciousness itself is evidence of the divine feminine imprisoned in matter. Your capacity for gnosis, for direct knowing that transcends reason and doctrine, is Sophia's gift, her essence living on in you. The cosmic architecture the Gnostics described was elaborate and specific. Between the Pleroma and the material world stretched multiple spheres, each ruled by one of Yaldabaoth's archons. These planetary rulers were not merely symbolic, they represented the actual cosmic forces that keep souls trapped in cycles of incarnation, bound to the wheel of birth and death. The 7 classical planets became prisons, each archon demanding its tribute of ignorance, suffering, passion, and confusion. To be born into a human body was to descend through all 7 spheres, each one clothing the divine spark in another layer of forgetfulness, until by the time you drew your first breath, you had completely forgotten your celestial origin. But Sophia did not remain passive in her fallen state. From within her imprisonment, she cried out to the true Father, the unknowable depth beyond even the Pleroma. Her prayer echoed through dimensions of reality that most religious traditions cannot even name. And the Father, moved by compassion for his emanation, sent forth the Christ, not as a random act of mercy toward created beings, but as a deliberate rescue mission to retrieve the fallen aeon, to restore Sophia to her rightful place in the fullness. This reframes everything you thought you knew about the Incarnation. When the Christ descended through the celestial spheres, he was not primarily concerned with teaching moral lessons to humans or offering sacrifice for sin. He was navigating through enemy territory, moving through the domains of the archons who had no power over him because he carried no imprint of their creation. The Gnostic text, Trimorphic Protanoia, describes this descent. I put on Jesus. I bore him from the cursed wood and established him in the dwelling places of his Father. The Christ temporarily inhabited the man Jesus, using his body as a vehicle to operate in the material realm, all in service of the greater mission to awaken Sophia's scattered light. The teachings of Jesus in the Gnostic Gospels take on entirely new meaning through this lens. When he spoke of the kingdom of heaven being within you, he was not offering a metaphor for moral goodness. He was identifying the spark of Sophia's light that dwells in your deepest consciousness. When he said, I am the light of the world, he was announcing himself as the illumination that reveals your true nature, the one who came to awaken what has been sleeping in you since before the foundations of the world were laid. The Gospel of Thomas preserves this more clearly than the canonical texts. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. Consider the implications of this cosmic drama. The Christ descended specifically to gather the scattered fragments of Sophia, to awaken her light wherever it had fallen in creation. Humans became the recipients of salvation, not because we were the beloved children of God who had sinned and needed forgiveness. But because we contained within us the very thing the Christ came to rescue, we are collateral salvation, inadvertent beneficiaries of a divine rescue operation that was aimed at something both within us and beyond us. The Sophia trapped in your consciousness is both you and not you. It is the truest part of your being, yet it belongs to a reality that predates and transcends your individual existence. Exclusive limited time offer, 85% off the entire Hidden Codex collection. Receive the wisdom of all 24 volumes and, as an unmissable bonus, the 7 frequencies of manifestation, a journey with the Sophia Codex. Click the link in the description and in the first comment. This interpretation finds profound parallels in other mystical traditions, though they describe the same reality using different symbolic language. In Kabbalah, the Shekinah represents the feminine aspect of God in exile, dwelling with humanity in the material world, awaiting reunion with the divine masculine. The Kabbalistic concept of tikkun olam, the repair of the world, involves gathering scattered divine sparks and returning them to their source. The mystic Isaac Luria taught that the original vessels of creation shattered, unable to contain the infinite light, and that holy sparks became trapped in shells of materiality. The task of the righteous is to liberate these sparks through right action and consciousness, remarkably similar to the Christ's mission of awakening Sophia's scattered light. In Hinduism, the concept of Shakti, divine feminine power, becoming entrapped in Maya, the illusion of material existence, mirrors the Sophia myth. The awakening of Kundalini, the serpent power coiled at the base of the spine, represents Shakti's return journey to reunion with Shiva in the crown of consciousness. Every spiritual practice in tantric traditions aims at facilitating this divine reunion, this restoration of the feminine power to its rightful throne. Even the Buddhist concept of Buddha nature, the enlightened essence trapped within the illusion of separate selfhood, echoes this archetypal pattern of divine essence imprisoned in ignorance awaiting liberation. The early church fathers understood how dangerous these ideas were to their emerging orthodoxy. If salvation was not dependent on institutional mediation, if the divine feminine was central to cosmology, if the creator God of the Old Testament was actually an ignorant demiurge rather than the supreme father, then the entire hierarchical structure of priesthood and sacrament collapsed. Irenaeus of Lyon devoted his entire treatise against heresies to dismantling gnostic Christianity, but his very vehemence reveals how widespread and compelling these teachings were. He wrote with barely concealed panic, "They maintain that Sophia herself suffered passion apart from the embrace of her consort, and that this resulted in the projection of an imperfect work." He needed to discredit this narrative because it removed the Church's monopoly on salvation. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE formalized Orthodox Christianity's rejection of these ideas, but the Gnostic understanding never completely disappeared. It went underground, surfacing in medieval mysticism, in the veneration of the Black Madonna, in the Cathar and Bogomil movements that Rome crushed with shocking brutality. The Cathars of southern France taught that the material world was created by an evil god, that Christ was a spiritual messenger rather than a blood sacrifice, that women could serve as spiritual teachers, all echoes of the original Gnostic vision. When Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade in 1209, the systematic slaughter that followed was not just political suppression, but theological warfare, an attempt to erase the last public manifestation of the Sophia tradition from European consciousness. Yet even in Orthodox Christianity, traces of the suppressed narrative persist. The figure of Mary Magdalene in Gnostic texts is often identified as Sophia's earthly representative, the one who truly understood Christ's mission while the male apostles remained confused. The Gospel of Mary depicts her as the disciple who received secret teachings that Peter and the others could not comprehend. In the Pistis Sophia, one of the most elaborate Gnostic texts, Mary Magdalene asks the majority of questions and receives the deepest revelations. She represents human consciousness awakening to its divine origin, Sophia recognizing herself through the mirror of Christ's presence. The psychological dimensions of this myth speak directly to contemporary understanding of trauma, dissociation, and integration. Depth psychology, particularly in the Jungian tradition, recognizes the divine feminine as an essential aspect of wholeness that patriarchal consciousness has repressed and devalued. Carl Jung himself was deeply influenced by Gnostic texts, seeing in them a more complete map of the psyche than orthodox Christianity provided. The fallen Sophia represents the anima, the feminine soul image that gets projected outward and lost in the world, awaiting conscious recognition and integration. Christ's descent becomes the ego's journey into the unconscious to rescue and reintegrate the lost feminine principle. Modern trauma theory offers another lens for understanding Sophia's imprisonment. Traumatic experience creates dissociation, splitting consciousness into fragments that become inaccessible to normal awareness, trapped in frozen states of fear and confusion. The therapeutic process involves careful descent into these dissociated parts, offering the witnessing presence that allows them to unfreeze, to be seen, to be welcomed back into integrated consciousness. In this light, the Christ's mission mirrors deep psychological healing, a conscious, loving presence descending into the darkest corners of the psyche to retrieve what has been exiled and forgotten. What does it mean for your daily life to understand yourself as carrying Sophia's light? It transforms the entire project of spiritual practice. You are not trying to become good enough to deserve God's love. You are not working to transcend your sinful nature. Instead, you are engaged in the sacred task of remembering what you have always been, a fragment of divine wisdom that became trapped in matter and forgot its source. Every moment of true recognition, every flash of gnosis that pierces through the veil of ordinary perception, is Sophia awakening in you. Every time you refuse the Archon's demand that you remain small, anxious, and controlled, you are participating in her liberation. The Gnostic path is not about belief, but about experience, not about obedience, but about knowing. When you sit in meditation and glimpse the vast silence that underlies all thought, that is Sophia touching her own essence in you. When you stand under the stars and feel the strange certainty that you are not fundamentally separate from what you observe, that is her remembering the Pleroma. When you encounter genuine beauty, not mere prettiness, but beauty that breaks your heart open, that is her recognition of what she lost in her fall into matter. The poets have always known this. Rilke wrote, "Beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we are still just able to endure." He was describing Sophia's effect on consciousness trapped in mundane reality. The practices of the ancient Gnostic schools were designed to facilitate this awakening. They did not build massive cathedrals or elaborate public rituals. They gathered in homes, in caves, in secret spaces where they could engage in the real work. They practiced elaborate visualizations of ascending through the planetary spheres, learning the names and passwords that would allow them to pass each Archon ruler. They studied the complex mythologies not as literal cosmology, but as maps of consciousness, internalized pathways back to the fullness. They used the bridal chamber sacrament, a mysterious ritual that involved sacred union as a means of restoring the divine syzygy, the male-female pairing that had been disrupted by Sophia's solitary creation. The Gospel of Philip describes this practice cryptically. The mysteries of truth are revealed in types and images. The bridal chamber remains hidden. It is the holy within the holy. Scholars debate whether this referred to actual sexual rites or to mystical states of consciousness, but perhaps that distinction misses the point. The body was not rejected by Gnostics as purely evil, that is, a mischaracterization. Rather, they understood that spirit trapped in matter could use matter itself as a vehicle for return. The body, with its capacity for ecstasy and dissolution of boundaries, could become the very means of liberation from material imprisonment. Seekers, we've just launched a new channel dedicated to spiritual awakening and manifestation, The Hidden Path. To welcome new subscribers, we're offering a complimentary ebook, Alignment, 7 Phases of Consciousness Awakening. Get your copy by subscribing to the channel using the link in the description. You might wonder why this interpretation of Christianity was so thoroughly suppressed if it contains legitimate wisdom. The answer involves both theological and sociological factors. Gnosticism was fundamentally elitist in a way that mass religion cannot tolerate. It insisted that salvation came through direct knowing rather than faith, through individual illumination rather than collective ritual. Not everyone was ready for gnosis. Not everyone carried enough of Sophia's light to awaken in this lifetime. The Valentinian Gnostics divided humanity into 3 categories: the spirituals who could achieve gnosis, the psychics who could be saved through faith and good works, and the hilics who were too deeply identified with matter to awaken at all. This hierarchy was incompatible with Christianity's emerging emphasis on universal salvation offered freely to all believers. Moreover, Gnostic Christianity threatened the social order in ways that Roman and later Byzantine authorities could not permit. If the creator of this world was an ignorant demiurge, then his laws, including the laws of earthly kingdoms claiming divine sanction, held no ultimate authority. If women carried the same divine spark as men and could access gnosis directly, then the patriarchal structure of church and society lost its theological foundation. If matter itself was the result of divine error, then the accumulation of wealth and power in material form became obviously absurd. The Gnostic vision was socially revolutionary, which is why it had to be eliminated alongside its theological claims. Yet here we are, 2 millennia later, and the Sophia myth speaks to contemporary consciousness with renewed urgency. We live in an age when the divine feminine has been systematically degraded for so long that the planet itself, often understood as the body of Sophia in esoteric traditions, teeters on the edge of ecological collapse. The masculine principle of dominance, extraction and control has created a world where wisdom is devalued in favor of information, where communion with nature is replaced by exploitation of resources, where the sacred has been reduced to the measurable. The cry of Sophia, imprisoned in matter, is the cry of the earth itself, calling for recognition and liberation. The rise of interest in Gnostic texts and ideas reflects a deep collective longing for a different narrative, one that makes room for the feminine in the Godhead, one that challenges the authority of institutional religion and governmental control, one that places direct experience at the center of spiritual life. When you read these words and feel something stirring in your depths, that is not intellectual interest alone. That is recognition. That is Sophia's light in you, responding to its own story, remembering the truth that predates your birth and will continue after your death. This is the secret that cannot be spoken in churches still claiming that salvation comes only through acceptance of Jesus as personal Lord and Savior. Because the Christ did not come primarily to save you from your sins. He came as the cosmic physician, descending into the darkest regions of materiality to awaken what had fallen into forgetfulness. You are saved, not because you are the beloved object of divine attention, but because you contain within your consciousness a fragment of what the divine most seeks to restore to itself. This should not diminish you, but rather elevate your understanding of your place in the cosmic order. You are not a worm deserving hell, not a sinner in need of grace. You are a vessel carrying divine light in exile, waiting to remember what you truly are. The path forward is not about rejecting the historical Jesus or abandoning Christianity entirely, but about recovering its hidden dimension, the mystical core that orthodoxy paved over with creed and doctrine. It means reading the canonical Gospels with new eyes, seeing beneath the surface narrative to the deeper pattern. When Jesus says, "I and the Father are one," hear it as the Christ announcing his origin in the Pleroma beyond the demiurge's creation. When he speaks of his kingdom not being of this world, understand that he refers to the realm of the aeons, the fullness from which he descended. When he declares that whoever has seen him has seen the Father, recognize this as the revelation that breaks through the demiurge's false claim to supreme divinity. Your daily practice becomes one of remembrance rather than repentance. Each morning when you wake, know that Sophia's light has been sleeping in you through the night and is now stirring again. Each time you choose awareness over automaticity, presence over distraction, you strengthen the awakening. The archons feed on your unconsciousness, your fear, your identification with the material self. Your gnosis starves them of power. The simple act of recognizing that you are not your anxious thoughts, not your conditioned reactions, not even your personal history. This recognition participates in Sophia's liberation from the illusions that imprison her. Understand that this is not a belief system to adopt, but a remembering to undergo. The mind cannot grasp it through intellectual analysis alone, though study of the texts can prepare the ground. The heart must be broken open by beauty, by love, by glimpses of the infinite that shatter the comfortable boundaries of conventional consciousness. The body must learn to recognize the difference between the archon's false pleasures, the addictive cycles of desire and disappointment, and the genuine joy of divine presence moving through flesh. If these words have kindled something ancient in you, if you feel the stirring of recognition that cannot quite be named, then Sophia's light in you is responding to the call. This is not about joining another religious system or adopting a new set of beliefs. This is about direct knowing, about gnosis that transforms from within rather than information that decorates the surface. The Gnostic path has always been hidden because it cannot be taught like ordinary knowledge. It must be awakened through resonance, through the meeting of light with light across the veils of forgetfulness. We gather here not as believers, but as rememberers, not as followers, but as fellow travelers on the return journey to the fullness. Every conversation in this space, every exploration of hidden wisdom, every moment of genuine questioning contributes to the great work of liberation. Sophia's light scattered throughout creation is gathering itself back together, fragment by fragment, consciousness by consciousness. You are not passive recipients of salvation earned by another's sacrifice. You are active participants in the cosmic restoration, carrying within you the very treasure that all heaven seeks. The Church tried to hide this truth because, revealed, it renders obsolete every claim to exclusive spiritual authority. You need no mediator between your consciousness and the divine. You need no priest to absolve your sins, no sacrament to convey grace, no institution to validate your experience. The kingdom is within you, because Sophia's light has always been within you, waiting to be recognized, waiting to remember itself, waiting to begin the return journey home. This was the secret the earliest followers of the Way understood before orthodoxy rewrote the story into something safer, more controllable, more profitable for those who claim to speak for God. Stand now in the knowing that you carry starlight in the depths of your being. Walk through the world as one who remembers their celestial origin while dwelling temporarily in flesh. Meet other eyes with the recognition that you are encountering Sophia's light, wearing different faces, playing in different forms, always seeking itself through the maze of material existence. This is the great work, the secret task, the hidden meaning beneath all religious symbolism and ritual. Not salvation from sin, but awakening from forgetfulness. Not redemption through faith, but restoration through gnosis. Not obedience to law, but liberation through direct knowing. The Christ came for Sophia, and in finding her scattered light in you, you too are gathered into the rescue, swept up in the cosmic return to the fullness. This is grace beyond theology, love beyond doctrine, truth beyond belief. This is the secret the churches could not contain, the wisdom they tried to bury, the light they could never quite extinguish. And now it speaks in you, remembering itself, preparing for the journey home. If you enjoy our content and want to support us, consider becoming a channel member. Your membership will give you access to exclusive content, such as audiobook versions of our ebooks.